opportunity to introduce you to a few members of the POP family who join us here today. We have Anna right there. And
Hi, thank you for joining us today.
thank you.
Hi, Anna.
We have Komal, uh, who we have Nahid. Hey, Nahid.
Okay.
Hi.
We have
Hi,
Drisha.
hi, Nahid.
We
Hi,
have
Patricia.
Drisha. We have Vanessa.
Hi, really nice to meet you. Thank
Hi,
you.
nice meeting you.
We have Daniela. Hey, Danny.
Hi, Dr. Jian. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you, Daniela.
And we have Dr. Norma.
Good morning, Dr. Liu. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Norma. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Nice to meet
Okay,
you
good.
today.
Nice meeting you.
Such a pleasure. I'd like to start, if I may, please, first off by conveying a very, very warm welcome to Dr. Jian Liu and everyone who's joining us, both in the room and via YouTube and streaming, to the POP Climate Leadership Conversation, a tribute to our chief mentor. The project aims to strengthen youth leadership and explore tactics that empower the youth to take action and tackle the most pressing environmental issues faced globally. We are conducting a series of conversations on leadership strategies, recommendations, reflections, and examples, each focused on global leadership and a different pressing environmental issue. This initiative is designed and implemented as a tribute to our chief mentor, late Dr. R.K. Pachauri. Today, we have the greatest pleasure and honor of speaking with Dr. Jian Liu of the Science Division UN Environment Program. With that, I'd like to say a very warm welcome, Dr. Jian Liu. It's such a pleasure and a privilege and an honor to be able to meet you here virtually. And like you said, we eagerly look forward to an opportunity to meet in person soon. But to be able to spend time with you today and be inspired by your voice and wisdom means everything to us. So thank you once again, a very warm welcome. And with that, I'll hand over to Anna to get us to go forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash.
Thank
The
you,
honor is
sir.
mine. And I'll be under the guidance of Anna, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you also to everyone who's here with us in the room and to everyone who's watching us on YouTube. I will now go ahead and introduce our guest for the day. Dr. Jian Liu is currently the director of the Science Division UN Environment Program. From March 2017 to February 2021, he also served as the UNEP Chief Scientist as an adjunct to his function as director of Science Division. Dr. Jian Liu has over 30 years of professional experience in science and policy in the specific domains of ecosystems management, agriculture, environment, and climate change at national, regional, and global levels, in particular in developing countries. Jian holds a doctorate degree in physical geography from the Graduate School of Chinese Academy of Science, Beijing, China. He was the director of UNEP's International Ecosystem Management Partnerships, the first global center on ecosystem management in the Global South, which he established as the founding director. Prior to his appointment, he served as the chief of UNEP's Climate Change Adaptation Unit and the deputy secretary of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. His earlier posts include Deputy Director General of the Bureau of Resources and Environment, Chinese Academy of Sciences, Director of the Chinese Ecosystem Research Network, and Manager of the Environment Program for the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will have a couple of youth leaders who will be asking questions, and our first question will come from our senior mentor, Dr. Ash Pachauri.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Dr. Jian Liu, and thank you, Anna, for the very kind introduction and for getting us started on this very important and inspiring discussion. Dr. Liu, I'd like to first off thank you and say that, as part of the POP family, we're absolutely delighted to have you here. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, if I may, please, on what leadership. I know we talked about a few things right now, but in your mind, particularly where youth are concerned, the need for us to protect our planet and the need for youth to take action implies some level of willingness to take on leadership and a role for leadership. What in your mind is that leadership, Dr. Jian Liu? Please. Thank you.
Well, this is a big question. Actually, each one of us actually needs to take leadership when it comes to the environment, because we're all these stewards of this planet, and we're all held accountable, for its health, which means that without which we couldn't have health ourselves. And the COVID-19 is a typical example. So obviously, we need that kind of leadership. In terms of youth leadership, I could see that a lot of the good examples are already in the world, in particular in the domain of climate change. And I hope that you could see this again at COP26 of the UNFCCC in November in Glasgow. A lot of youth is hopefully could be able to gather there, given that they are protected by the vaccine. So in previous sessions, each one of the sessions you could see large movements, large gathering of the youth group, and they are really pushing the parties to reach agreement, including pushing parties to reach the Paris Agreement on climate change. And those are the typical examples. And also there's a very young leader from Greta from Sweden, and she's perhaps the most popular young leader in the young generation, right? So, and she is respected, and she is admired by many, young fellows. But also for us, we also show a lot of respect to her. The sort of courage that she has, the sort of confidence she has, and the sort of dedication, to the planet, to the health of the planet. She demonstrates a great leadership. So that's a very good example. Of course, the young generation, they are either undergraduates in university or graduates in universities, or young fellows in different kind of institutions, universities. Obviously, this group is the most talented group, I must say. And they are very acceptable to new knowledge, and they believe in the science. And they themselves, once educated, they could be all the sort of leaders and ambassadors, conveying the key messages of the science to the rest of the community. Of course, given that most of this young generation, they are in the universities, they are well educated, and they are the future leaders as well. Talking about leadership, they're going to be taking this sort of leadership position in a sort of with the decision-making power at different levels. So that's the sort of leadership I'm expecting. And in particular, climate change is not a short-term thing, it's a long-term thing. And given the inertia, even if we stop the carbon emission right now, which is almost impossible, but we are talking about by 2050, many, at least the developed countries, will reach carbon neutral. But even if that is stopped today, the inertia will continue. Okay, continue for hundreds of years. So that's something that is both urgent but also long-term. So that's why we need leadership. We need leadership, especially from the young generation, to push for this agenda and to take action. I hope I did not miss anything.
No, you covered so much ground, and I just want to say I deeply respect what you've shared. I think so many important points, not to mention the fact that the COP is a very important milestone in this movement right now, and in achieving the goals that we need to achieve, and do so very rapidly, especially as we know this is a very decisive decade for us. But also the fact that you said a few other really important things, that young people, especially as we know, we have models like Greta Thunberg, who are big advocates for the science. Youth can become ambassadors for this issue and also for the science. And that is a very critical point. Certainly, we know that some young people are within school and educational institutions, but having appreciation and an understanding of the science and action that's then driven by that science is crucial. And so I think that this is a very, very important point that you shared. And I also completely agree with you that, youth are leaders of today, tomorrow, and we are going to need young people to step up and to lead this. And we need the kind of collective action that we've never needed perhaps before today in order to achieve these goals. So I think there's so many important messages that you shared, and I just want to thank you very much for sharing that, because it sets the context for a lot of the discussion we'll have. But also I think it's provided very key direction for a lot of the young people who are listening in on this conversation. And I want to thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you, Dr. Jian Liu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredible answer. I will now hand it over to Komal Mittal from India, who will be asking our next question.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Jian today. So my question to you is, what is the impact of policy in ecosystem management, agriculture, and climate change? How can developing countries benefit from science to develop sound policies in these topics?
Sorry, repeat the second question.
Yeah. How can developing countries benefit from science to develop sound policies in these topics?
Okay, thank you very much for the good question. Actually, to be honest, we in our global environmental outlook, the 6th edition, we had an opportunity to look at examples of policy effectiveness, how we manage our ecosystem, how we manage our agricultural production in a sustainable way, and how we can make sure that the climate actions are taking place in the most cost-effective way, etc., etc. What are our findings there are not very impressive. I must tell you this, because this is the first time that UNEP, in its global environmental outlook, to start looking at the policy effectiveness. Of course, many countries, they have this kind of sectorial policy. For agriculture, there's one portfolio of policy ensuring food production, food security, etc., etc. And then the other ministry of environment or ministry of forestry, has another set of policies that would protect this piece of wetland, that piece of forest, and that piece of peatland, etc., etc. But these policies in one country, they may not necessarily talk to each other. Okay, they may not necessarily talk to each other. That's one big problem. because if you read our synthesis report, Making Peace with Nature, we are facing the three crises, basically. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and loss of habitat for the species, and pollution. And these problems, they are interlinked. If you want to address one problem, then you have to address the other. Otherwise, it'd be much less effective than you address it integratedly. So that means we need to have, number one, a strong science as the basis. And number two, ministries, the secretarial ministries, line ministries need to talk to each other. I need to come up with policies that are complementary, ensuring the food production, the livelihood of people, the management of ecosystems, and also green production and green consumption. And these are the sort of not necessarily administrative, but at national level. So there are good examples from both developed and developing countries. But I don't think I have time to list all this. But basically, each country has its own policy on different sectors. But not many countries we found they bring everybody together and to address the issues in an integrated manner. So that's a limitation. That's the bottleneck. And the second one is that in the policy making process in many developing countries, there's a lack of data and information, and there's a lack of adequate knowledge to provide the sort of good basis for policy making. And this is also one of the key findings of our global environmental assessment, global environmental outlook. So that's something that we also need to look into. So, and the third part is that we need to have this kind of dialogue between the science community and the policy community, and to really make the connection between science and policy. And that's why, and that's exactly what UNEP is pushing to increase the sort of interface between science and policy. Because otherwise, I can give you one example. We have in UNEP back to 2017 set up a mechanism called the Science Policy Business Forum. Brings together leaders from business community, from science community, and from policy community. Let them talk to each other. Let the science talk to the policy, and also let the science to influence the investment, the market, the trade, the production lines, so that will make sure that on each and every section of the lines from consumption to production, making sure that we're addressing the root causes of all these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. And yeah, it is very important to have an interconnectivity and to know that importance between the science and the policies, to know where we are going and how we can communicate this with the young people and the other young generations. Thank you very much for the insight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamal and Dr. Jian Liu. And now our next question will be asked by Naid Perez, who is in Mexico.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, Dr. Jian. Well, my question is, how can policy take into account the development of nations, but without compromising the sustainable management of resources?
Well, once again, first of all, this is a kind of continuity from the last topic, pretty much, because when you actually, I myself, I grew up from the countryside in China. So we know exactly how people live in the rural area, especially before China, open this door to the outside world. And from a community perspective, the first things first, you need to think about livelihood. Okay, you need to think about livelihood, but you need to have a sustainable livelihood, which is very important. And that means if you produce things on the cropland, you produce food, you have to make sure that your cropland will be sustainable in the future. And this is what we call sustainable agriculture. Okay, and sustainable agriculture means that you're not only looking at how much you produce, but you also look at how long you produce. Okay, and then that means you need to protect the organic matter in the soil, and that means you need to manage the whole ecosystem rather than only a piece of land. So that's one example how you manage from bottoms up, from the community perspective. So that means that you need to link when you make a policy at national level, you need to link the food production. I'm referring to the agriculture sector. You need to link the ecosystem management, but within the context of now climate change. So that's why when I was the director of the International Ecosystem Management Partnership, we, through 2 years of consultations with colleagues around the world, including my former boss, the late Dr. R.K. Pachauri, and we came up with a flagship program called Climate Change, Ecosystem Management, and Livelihood. So only when you look at the livelihood side of it, be it in rural areas, be it in the cities, could only people care about the environment. So, but it doesn't mean that they have to split. You have to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. I totally agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Naib and Dr. Jian. Now I would like to hand it over to Daniela Gomez, who will be asking our next question.
Thank you. Okay, so some people consider our generation to be intolerable or impatient. So my question to you is, what advice would you give the youth to deal with the frustration of not being heard by policymakers? So if we take into account that the UN is not legally binding, it must be kind of frustrating to see policymakers stray from research and science and just take matters into what they think is the best course of action.
Well, thank you very much, Daniela, for the good question. You have all good reasons for being impatient. Perhaps if I were in your age, seeing even at my age, we're also a bit impatient. Let me put it this way. But you have to find a way to be patient, but also to be effective in communicating the key messages from the science and in convincing the policymakers to take action, to make the right decisions, the lawmakers to have the right laws at the national level and global level. So, so that's, I think only impatience will not be that helpful. But impatience with good pathways and good tools and methods to be able to convince, to be part of the discussion and to be able to convince policymakers. And that's the way it should be. And also as UNEP, we are a science-based or UN organization. And actually UNEP was the first UN organization establishing the post of chief scientist. I was the third chief scientist. Now we have the fourth one since March, last March. So So basically, the reason for that post in existence was pretty much to bring together the science and policy, to make that connection, and to use the right science to be able not only to tell the policymakers that there are a lot of problems, you need to resolve it, but also to use the science to be able to tell them, here are the solutions, here are the options that you can look at, you can take a decision amongst to choose one of the options that suits your situation. It's not that one model suits fits all, but there is something that the policymakers should take. When I reach out to more than 20 countries, both in Africa and in Asia Pacific, mostly developing countries, South Asia, West Africa, East Africa, and these regions. And ministers always, when you talk to the environment ministers, the problems that we face, and they would most likely tell you, well, sir, we know our problems better than you do, but give us the solutions. Give us something that I can do, So that brings the sort of the second part of the science. The first part of the science is to identify the issues, alert people, but the second part of the science is to identify the solutions. Okay, that could be used by policymakers, by investors, by finance sector, by the market, and actually to be able to tell the truth. From our emissions gap report, we have an emissions gap report, which we publish every year, 2 weeks before the COP, the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC. And in that report, we always say that our capacity, our technological potential to ensure that we could reach the Paris target is twice as much as we need to reach the Paris Agreement. So, and that means that we need a strong leadership. We'll talk about leadership. We need decisive actions at times, but those decisive actions have to be based on the solid science, using the best options, that making sure that we secure livelihood. In the meantime, we secure our environment. So not necessarily compromising one or the other, to bring in this sort of idea of co-benefits rather than trade-offs. So that's what the science is about. That will also make you less impatient, but more capable, and with more courage to work with the policymakers as part of the decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. I really liked it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for the question, and Dr. Jian for the answer. I think we have time for one more question, and so I was wondering if I could ask. I found this that you were saying about co-benefits rather than trade-offs really interesting, because I think it's something we see very often with companies maybe not wanting to be sustainable because they think it'll affect maybe their money or something like that. So how can we enforce this idea that there's a way to find co-benefits?
No, actually, if you look at the current discussion, the net zero targets 2050, and that's already a very big market signal that investors are looking for. Okay, and our global target, a long-term target, is to reduce the carbon emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. And that target would benefit a lot of business sector if we are to develop the green technologies, the sort of low carbon or non-carbon energy sources, like the solar panel, like the wind energy, like the the tide, like the hydropower, not at the cost of the ecosystem and biodiversity, but as much as possible protecting them on the contrary. So basically renewable energies. So these are the sort of increasing emerging market. The other example is air pollution. And in the air, there are a lot of short-lived climate pollutants. But reducing air pollution means that you also reduce greenhouse gases. And actually, in many developed countries, they may not have the money to simply reduce the carbon emissions, but they must have the money to reduce air pollution. And because the air pollution is a great cost both to human lives, but also on their property. And the World Bank actually gave a figure that every year the economic cost for air pollution is $5 trillion, which is more than the GDP of Japan, the third largest economy. And 7 million people premature dies from air pollution. So that kind of cost is not something that you could afford, and you have to clean the air. Clean the air means that you need to develop clean energy. You need to develop clean production lines. So that's what we call co-benefits. Actually, UNEP has a good program called Climate and Clean Air Correlation. So, and that correlation, just look at the co-benefits. So many countries are taking actions based on their guidelines. Is that does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really like the example about the air pollution, right? Because once you look at the numbers, it's really taking a toll on not only on the economy but on people's lives. So there's a common solution to this. Thank you so much. I will now hand it over to Dr. Ash again, so he can give some conclusions on the session.
Thank you. I just think that this has been such a rich and informative and insightful discussion, and I want to thank you, Dr. Jian Liu. As we sort of wind down, I thought I would ask you, if I may. I know you've sort of referred to the COP on more than one occasion during the course of this conversation, and clearly it is a moment and milestone for us. And I thought I would ask you, what your expectations in terms of you talked about the voices of youth in the presence of movements, and in light of this very important connection you drew, which is really between science, policy, and then finance, and therefore from end to end, from production to consumption, and the central thread being science, and also the importance of amplifying the voices and the role of young people and bringing science to the fore. As we head to Glasgow in a few months from now, sir, what would your vision be for and hope be for what we will walk away with from Glasgow? And I know that this is obviously something that we all have aspirations for, but I think you're grounded in the science, and I'm wondering what your vision for this is, and particularly how then youth movements can be informed to take off from there, because this decade is so crucial for us, and it's a make or break a decade. So I'm eager, and I know we talked about the issue of air pollution, the pandemic, issues of biodiversity and habitat. So there's a lot, it's a wide sort of scape of issues, but I'd love to hear your thoughts for what is most pressing, please. Thank you.
Well, in terms of climate change, of course, most pressing one is how we can reduce emissions of greenhouse gases, and that's number one issue. That's the most pressing issue. That's the issue that my late boss, Dr. Aki Pachauri, had been striving for, had been fighting for. I was a close follower after him on that. Obviously, the movement has a big role to play in several ways. The easiest way is to pick up this the cell phone, and you could search online all these scientific reports from different assessments, be it from the IPCC, be it from UNEP, be it from WMO, and be it from this is one thing, easy thing to do, and transmit them or translate them into your own natural language if your natural language is not English, and let more people know. And this is real. This is happening, and everybody needs to take action. And number two, these days I've been thinking the impact on national policies of our flagship reports, and we are very good at releasing a report with so much public media exposure, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, and all the others, Euronews. But when it comes to decision-making process at national level, this is where there's a gap. There's a big gap. Especially most of the global science agencies, they don't have a national office to push for this. Okay, so the level of take up of the key findings of those reports in the national policy setting process is very low. It's very low. I don't have a percentage, but I sense this is very low, including in my own country here. I don't think a lot of top decision makers or top think tanks, they know our report, they know what we were talking about in the report. So that's something that perhaps at national level, I would encourage you guys to really do something. We could have a little offline discussion on this, Ash, if you're interested. Of course, not everybody can go to the COP, and actually to sort of reduce or minimize the carbon footprint, perhaps we better go online rather than go there with a big carbon footprint. So that is something that perhaps you could think about innovative ways of influencing other people, influencing your classmates, influencing your family members, and take action every day, waste less, order less when you are in restaurants, etc. So this is everybody's business. So everybody has to be accounted for. So that's something that I would also add. But in short, the future is yours. The hope is also yours. So I would really encourage you to work based on the science, to link the science with policy, and to encourage more people to take actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is so profoundly inspirational. And I just want to say, first of all, I would love to have that offline conversation. And I love what you said. There's so much very rich content out there, and how do we translate that into actionable plans? How can it work at the individual level, and how can it work at a systemic level, and what is the role to play as far as youth are concerned, communities are concerned? I would love to be able to seek your thoughts and guidance on this. I also want to say thank you so much for bringing up the whole issue of, we go to meetings, and of course we contribute to, we develop a big carbon footprint in the process. And I wanted to say that, in fact, with the POP movement, we're hoping to have a very large youth contingent in the youth element, the pre-COP, the youth element, which is entirely virtual. We do hope to be able to work toward these steps that you have very clearly outlined for us, because I think what you brought up very importantly is that you've reiterated that the issue of the science of climate change is very important, and it has to serve as that foundation, but we have to then link it to policy and to action. And it's not sufficient to have the best science out there if we're not going to act on it. And I would love to seek your thoughts, your advice, and bring the POP family and the youth of the world that we're very actively engaging with. And I just wanted to say also, Dr. Jian Liu, that I think you brought up an important thing, because there's differences between countries and also within countries. And you very clearly alluded to that. And I wanted to say that, we are working actively in several parts of the world with a range of different communities, including indigenous communities, voices of youth, but women and youth, the role of our girls and in communities also. And there's a range of different dynamics from the development standpoint also. And we would want to carry everyone forward with us in this movement and all that we do. So we would definitely want to seek your guidance and your advice as we go forward. But I do want to take this opportunity once again, Dr. Jian Liu, to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your time, your invaluable time, your insights, and your inspiration to all of us. This guidance is crucial. You have been at the forefront and continue to be in terms of authoring, writing the science, and guiding the policy. And there is no one better than you to guide the youth of the world as youth take action to support the collective effort needed to protect our planet. So I just wanted to convey our gratitude. And I also wanted to thank you very much for being a precious part of the POP family. We are so grateful. And I really look forward to continuing our conversation, Dr. Jian Liu. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much, Ash, and all the colleagues online. My expectation is really, honest expectation is really to become the best friend, one of the best friends of the POP movement. Thank you.
Thank you. You are, and you're a precious part in terms of the POP family. So you're a member of the family, and we are deeply grateful and filled with gratitude to embrace you, Dr. Jian Liu, and thank you for your wisdom and your guidance and your time today. It means the world to us. I look forward to following up, Dr. Jian Liu, and to continuing our conversation and seeking your insights and wisdom as we go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay safe and